whittling this down to 19 points may be unacceptable to Russia. In fact, because a number of those things that have been reportedly stripped out, including those kind of more maximalist territorial concessions and questions of future NATO membership for Ukraine, are things that Russia, you would expect, would want to be in this plan.
Now, a big news this afternoon, and let's all cross our fingers about this. The White House is hailing what it calls tremendous progress in talks to end the war in Ukraine. In a statement on X, Donald Trump's spokeswoman said that just a few delicate but not insurmountable details remain to be sorted out in further talks. That is Caroline Levitt. Let's talk to Lara Spirit, who is Washington correspondent for The Times. So that statement on X came very recently, didn't it, Lara?
Yes, it did. It came, less than half an hour ago. And of course, it comes at a pretty critical juncture for those peace talks at a moment when negotiators from the US, chief among them, Army Secretary Driscoll, have been dispatched to talk in Abu Dhabi with Russian negotiators. And at a time when, as you say, the plan has been whittled down to those 19 points, when it's unclear if Russia is going to accept it, and when it's also unclear when Trump will speak to Zelensky. So at the moment, nothing is guaranteed, but it does seem like we had a post from Trump himself on Truth Social yesterday indicating that he thought progress could be ahead. And of course, we've just had this from Caroline Levitt saying a few but not insurmountable details. Of course, she did say something quite similar to this yesterday when she said that there were a few outstanding points, but nonetheless, it definitely signals that at this point in time, the White House is optimistic there might be a breakthrough soon.
OK, but no word from Russia at all.
No, I mean, we have had an indication from some reporting. Of course, the BBC has been reporting on what some of the Russian newspapers and media outlets are saying there, which indicate that whittling this down to 19 points may be unacceptable to Russia. In fact, because a number of those things that have been reportedly stripped out, including those kind of more maximalist territorial concessions and questions of future NATO membership for Ukraine, are things that Russia, you would expect, would want to be in this plan. So still some outstanding points they need to get right.
Right. Now, you mentioned this name of Driscoll in Abu Dhabi, the American representative talking to the Russians today. I confess I hadn't heard of this person. Who is he?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So he is a businessman. He's a lawyer. He's a former officer in the military. He is, he's fairly young. He's only, I think, 38 years old, if I'm correct, 39 years old. Sorry, forgive me. And he is a former Yale classmate of J.D. Vance, the vice president. And he was actually dispatched on a trip that was supposed to be concerning procurement for Ukraine, not this massive question of negotiations over the future peace plan. But at this point, he has been flung into the very centre of the questions around resolving this conflict, and has been dispatched to have high-level negotiations with Russian diplomats at this crucial time. So all eyes on Driscoll, someone who most people in Washington will have been aware of, but who at this point is now definitely up there with the more significant figures of this administration.
Right. It's very interesting, isn't it? And he is the Army Secretary officially. So I suppose people are going to be wondering, what about the Defence Secretary, Pete Hegseth? Where's he?
Well, Pete Hegseth is currently busy talking about an issue that has massively incensed a number of Republicans, including President Trump and indeed Caroline Levitt, who just mentioned the White House press secretary, which regards a video that some Democrats made. I don't know if you've seen this before, but where they spoke about the possibility that those in the services should disobey orders that they think are illegal. And that has sparked off a huge amount of controversy, with Republicans saying that it amounts to a kind of defiance of the commander-in-chief power that President Trump has, and Democrats saying actually it's a restatement of the law, which is to say you don't have to follow laws if they're illegal. But equally, those Democrats are not saying if they believe any of these orders so far have been illegal. So that's a massive controversy. Pete Hegseth leading the charge against these Democrats at the moment, and as you say, Driscoll seeming a more significant figure with regard to Ukraine than he does.
Right. So the next step then will presumably be, well, you tell me, who is likely to say something next?
Well, it's a very good question because we have all of these various diplomatic plates spinning at the moment in circumstances where you have Russian negotiators who are in conversations with the US. You, of course, have a number of important European conversations today as well after those meetings in Geneva, where Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, worked with the Europeans to create a plan that was more amenable, it seemed, to the Ukrainians and the Europeans than the previous iteration had been. And then you have the possibility of this meeting between President Trump and Zelensky that's said to be perhaps coming up soon, albeit we know that Trump is heading to Mar-a-Lago, to Florida, for Thanksgiving relatively soon, of course, after the famous turkey pardoning ceremony that we'll be seeing pretty imminently, actually, in the White House.
Yeah, Thanksgiving is Thursday, isn't it? Yeah, is that right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, we shouldn't kid ourselves. It's not a level playing field, this, is it? Because Putin presumably would be more than happy to carry on the war. I mean, the man's a tyrant. He doesn't care. He doesn't have to answer to anybody. But Zelensky, if he doesn't agree to this peace deal, he knows he's likely to lose American support. He's got to go for it, hasn't he?
Well, it's difficult for Zelensky because he knows that he can't dismiss this plan outright, that it would be very difficult to do that. But he also knows, as he said in that statement over the weekend about Ukraine's dignity being on the line, he knows that it's also very important to make sure that what the Ukrainians have been fighting for years now is front and center of the minds of negotiators when they are making this plan. So, yeah, it all just depends on what happens now. But Zelensky making, I think, very careful in the past to thank President Trump. And if he does have a meeting with President Trump, you would expect that he would be taking more of an attitude perhaps of recent meetings with him than he would with that the previous Oval Office meeting where he had that famous dressing down from both Trump and Vance, followed by a lot of European diplomacy to try and get those two leaders back around the table and on good terms again. So I think people will be hoping that Zelensky and Trump, as and when they do come together to discuss this conflict, that it will be on better terms rather than what.
But there must be doubts about Zelensky, about his ability to stay in power in Ukraine if he does go for this.
Well, of course, he's also separately battling, this corruption scandal in Ukraine that has come at obviously a really difficult time, given how critical a juncture we're at in the wider peace conversation. That obviously domestically has made questions about politics very difficult, but more broadly and with regard to this conflict at the moment, he will be focusing on the finer details of this. He, of course, has a huge amount of support from European leaders who have been foursquare behind him and who have been, of course, speaking to the administration and the Americans about how best to proceed with this deal. And it did seem after those conversations between Marco Rubio and Yermak, Zelensky's top aide in Geneva over the weekend, that they had definitely had more positive conversations about this than previous. And there were very effusive words by both of them to that effect. So at the moment, it's very, very hard to say what will happen next. But it does seem, I should say, like that previous deadline, the Thanksgiving deadline on Thursday, Caroline Levitt, the White House press secretary, appearing to water that down to language around as soon as possible. She said that recently, and also Rubio as well over the weekend, mentioning a number of different days of the week and saying as well they wanted to see it soon. But it seems like the idea that is a hard and fast deadline is falling away now.
Okay, really interesting. Lara, thank you very much indeed. That's Lara Spirit, who is the Times Washington correspondent.